297 pilots, 0 parachutes, 1 mission, certain death. April 6th, 1945. The largest suicide attack in military history is about to begin. But the Japanese have no idea they're flying into an invisible electronic killing field created by an $18 device that will change warfare forever. This is the story of how American scientists built the impossible, and why 1,900 kamikaze pilots never stood a chance. Dawn breaks over the East China Sea. 16 miles off Okinawa, radar operators aboard USS Laffey watch their screens with growing dread. Not dozens of contacts, hundreds. Gun crews load shells marked with cryptic letters, VT variable time. Orders regarding these rounds are absolute. Never allow them intact into enemy hands. Never discuss their function. If the ship goes down, flood the magazines completely. The sailors don't know why. They only know these shells represent their best chance of surviving what approaches. In the Combat Information Center, Commander Frederick Beckton studies the radar plot. 50 contacts, then 70, then more than operators can count. Operation Kikusui No. 1, 300 suicide aircraft in coordinated waves, 297 pilots sealed in cockpits with no survival equipment, no intention of returning. The mathematics are brutal. Conventional shells require 1,162 rounds to destroy a single kamikaze. At that rate, magazines empty before waves stop coming. But the VT shells change everything. 310 rounds per kill, four-fold improvement, the difference between annihilation and survival, if they work. At 0600 hours, the first wave arrives. Through morning haze comes the drone of hundreds of aircraft engines. Zero fighters, Yokosuka dive bombers laden with bombs, older aircraft pressed into suicide service. Among them, rocket-powered Oka flying bombs, 1,200-kilogram warheads capable of 575 miles per hour. Americans call them Baka, fool. The gun director acquires first target at 12,000 yards. Maximum range, the turrets train, barrels rise. The gunner's mate rams the first VT shell home. Every man knows these shells cost more than automobiles. Each contains electronics more sophisticated than most radios. The gun captain presses the firing key. Inside the nose cone, acceleration activates the battery. Vacuum tubes warm instantly. A miniature transmitter begins broadcasting radio waves. Invisible signals propagate outward at the speed of light. The approaching Zero pilot sees the muzzle flash. He's been briefed on American defenses, expects shells to burst at predetermined altitudes. He knows the statistics. Time-fused shells have 2% accuracy. He begins a shallow dive to accelerate through the kill zone. He doesn't know about the VT fuse. 3 miles from Laffey, the shell passes within 70 feet of the Zero. Radio waves detect the Doppler shift. The circuit closes. The shell explodes in a sphere of steel fragments with 70-foot burst radius. Triple the range of conventional shells. The Zero flies directly through the pattern. Shrapnel tears through aluminum, severs controls, punctures fuel. The engine dies. The pilot aims for the nearest ship, but altitude bleeds away. The Zero hits water 300 yards from Laffey. The bomb detonates on impact. White geyser erupts. The pilot dies, never knowing what killed him. But here's where it gets crazy. The sky fills with black puffs appearing with impossible accuracy. Explosions burst exactly where aircraft will be, as if American gunners see the future. Formations scatter. Pilots abandon coordination, each seeking his own path through walls of precisely timed detonations. This is what the VT fuse was designed to do. Not just destroy aircraft, but shatter tactics through psychological pressure. They keep coming. At 0744, Laffey comes under concentrated attack. 22 aircraft in 80 minutes. Gun crews fire continuously. Barrels glow red despite water cooling. 345 rounds of VT ammunition. 9 aircraft destroyed before reaching attack range. The proximity fuses allow engagement of multiple targets simultaneously, switching between threats without delays for manual fuse setting. But 9 kills aren't enough. 6 kamikazes strike Laffey. 4 bombs hit. The destroyer should be dead She survives. The VT fuses prevented 13 more attackers from reaching their target. Without those shells, Laffey dies in the first 10 minutes. Across the picket line, USS Aaron Ward faces 40 kamikaze aircraft. 52 minutes of continuous fire. VT shells destroy 6 completely, damage 5 others that crash before reaching the ship. Commander William Saunders testifies afterward that without proximity fuses, his ship would have been overwhelmed immediately. USS Morrison isn't as fortunate. She shoots down 8 attackers using VT ammunition, but numbers overwhelm her. 4 kamikazes strike in succession. Morrison sinks in minutes. 152 dead. Remember that number. You'll see why it matters. Hold on, because this is where everything changes. The story of how these impossible shells came to exist begins 5 years earlier, when British scientists declared the concept physically impossible. 1940, Johns Hopkins University, Baltimore. Dr. Merle Tuve receives a classified directive. Section T of the Applied Physics Laboratory must solve a problem the British abandoned. Build a proximity fuse that survives being fired from a gun. The British conception is elegant. A miniature radio system measuring Doppler shift to trigger detonation when passing targets. Simple physics. Impossible engineering. Standard vacuum tubes shatter under a few hundred Gs of force. The 5-inch gun generates 20,000 times gravity at firing. The shell accelerates to 2,600 feet per second while spinning at 25,000 revolutions per minute. Glass shatters, solder joints fail, wire filaments snap. The British concluded it couldn't be done. Tuve's team has no choice but to prove them wrong. The program receives classification equivalent to the Manhattan Project. The designation variable time deliberately misleads enemy intelligence. The truth about radio proximity triggering must remain secret. Security protocols are extreme. Workers manufacturing components don't know what they're building. Factories produce subassemblies without understanding how pieces fit together. The challenges seem insurmountable. Glass that can withstand 20,000 Gs doesn't exist. Electronics must fit in a space smaller than a milk bottle. 130 components manufactured to tolerances of thousandths of an inch. Battery systems must activate instantly from acceleration forces, then function reliably from 100 degrees to -50 Fahrenheit. Timeline is brutal. Military planners demand Pacific deployment by 1943, less than 3 years to solve insoluble problems. Failure means sailors die. Testing begins in 1941. First prototype tubes shatter during firing. Second generation shows promise, but fails reliability tests. Engineers work 16-hour days, 7 days a week. By mid-1942, the design stabilizes. Vacuum tubes survive. Battery systems activate. Radio circuits function. But survival isn't enough. Triggering must occur at precisely calculated distances. Too close, and they're no better than contact detonation. Too far, and fragments disperse below lethal density. December 1942. Production begins. 87 companies across 110 factories manufacture components. The industrial ecosystem grows to 112 firms. Each fuse costs $732 in 1942. More than most Americans earn in 6 months. By 1945, mass production drops cost to $18. What happened next shocked American commanders. January 5, 1943, Guadalcanal. USS Helena's 5-inch batteries load the first combat allocation of VT shells. The gun crews know only that these special rounds have priority handling and must not fall into enemy hands. Shortly after dawn, Japanese dive bombers approach. Lieutenant Red Cochran commands the aft 5-inch mount. The director orders commence firing. The first shell explodes too far away. Standard miss. The second shell passes within 70 feet of the diving valve. The VT fuse triggers. The shell explodes in a perfect sphere of fragments. The valve flies through the expanding pattern. Shrapnel tears through the aircraft. Control surfaces separate. The engine takes multiple hits. The dive bomber crashes into the ocean. Cochran's crew stares at the splash point. The shell didn't hit the target. didn't even pass particularly close, yet it destroyed the aircraft with one shot. 3 years of development, hundreds of millions invested, all validated in 30 seconds. The VT fuse works. By mid-1943, proximity fuses comprised 25% of anti-aircraft ammunition. That percentage rises to 75% by 1945. But success creates new danger. Every VT shell fired risks compromise. If Japan recovers intact fuses, they might develop countermeasures or copy the technology. Intelligence officers implement strict protocols. Damaged ships with VT ammunition receive orders to flood magazines before abandoning vessel. The technology is too valuable to lose. Japanese intelligence notes unusual characteristics by mid-1943. Reports describe shells exploding with uncanny accuracy. German intelligence shares similar observations, but neither Axis power comprehends the mechanism. Japanese scientists understand radio proximity principles in theory, but lack precision manufacturing capability. Japan's electronics industry, devastated by bombing and resource shortages, cannot replicate the technology. Even if they understood, Japan's entire electronics industry couldn't produce a fraction of the 70,000 VT fuses American factories manufactured daily by June 1945. The disparity in industrial capability becomes a weapon as decisive as the technology itself. Then, the Kamikaze appears. October 1944. Vice Admiral Takejiro Onishi proposes special attack units following catastrophic Japanese losses. Conventional tactics achieve 2% success rates, but suicide attacks transform inexperienced pilots into guided weapons. Early operations achieve 34% success rates. The mathematics seem favorable. One pilot, one obsolete aircraft, 250 kilograms of explosives, potentially sink a destroyer worth millions. But these calculations don't account for the VT fuse. April 1945, Kanoya Air Base, Kyushu. 23-year-old Corporal Hachiro Miyashita writes his final letter by candlelight. 98 hours flight time versus 500 for his instructors at Pearl Harbor. 6 weeks training versus 2 years. Tomorrow he climbs into a Zero with a bomb and flies toward the American fleet. He will not return. The Kamikaze program was born from desperation. After the Battle of the Philippine Sea, Japan lost most experienced pilots and carriers. Remaining aviators couldn't train replacements fast enough. Vice Admiral Onishi proposed the unthinkable. Transform inexperienced pilots into precision weapons. Skip advanced training. Teach navigation, ship recognition, final dive. Emphasize spiritual preparation over flying skills. Early results validated the approach. Lieutenant Yukio Seki's unit achieved devastating success at Leyte Gulf. Success rates exceeded 34%. 16-fold improvement over conventional attacks, but the Americans at Leyte hadn't fully deployed proximity fuses yet. Miyashita's letter describes duty, honor, sacrifice, nothing about fear, though it permeates every character. His commander explained the approach. Maintain altitude until in range. Begin dive from 3,000 meters. Accelerate through defensive fire. Aim for waterline. Do not deviate. Death is certain, but meaningless if the target survives. What his commander hasn't told him is that success rates collapsed over the past month. Fewer than 1 in 4 aircraft reach targets now versus 1 in 3 during Philippines. The difference seems minor. The implication is catastrophic. But Miyashita doesn't know this. He only knows tomorrow he dies for the Emperor. May 11th, 1945. USS Hugh W. Hadley. The destroyer takes position on radar picket. Crew at general quarters for 8 hours. Exhaustion competes with adrenaline. The 5-inch magazines are fully stocked. 75% VT shells. 3 days earlier, USS Drexler learned why this matters. The destroyer fought brilliantly until her VT ammunition ran out. Forced to rely on time-fused shells requiring precise range estimation, her guns couldn't maintain the defensive barrier. 2 kamikazes struck within 30 seconds. Drexler sank in under a minute. 158 dead. Remember, I mentioned that number? Ships that exhaust VT ammunition die fast, 0740 hours. Hadley's radar picks up massive contacts, multiple formations, staggered timing, different vectors, coordinated assault designed to overwhelm through numbers. The gun director acquires first target at 12,000 yards. 5-inch batteries open fire. First shell explodes 70 feet from a diving Zero. Fragments shred control surfaces. The Zero rolls inverted and plunges into the sea. More contacts appear. Gun crews develop rhythm. Load, fire, load, fire. 15 rounds per minute. Each shell carries its own electronic brain. The technique evolves during combat. Lead targets with continuous fire. Create walls of VT explosions aircraft must fly through. Make the approach itself a killing zone. Black puffs fill the sky in impossible patterns. Shells exploding exactly where aircraft will be. Kamikaze pilots discover their evasion tactics no longer work. High-speed dives place them in VT kill zones for extended periods. Low-altitude approaches trigger detonations near sea surface. Dawn attacks provide no advantage because shells don't rely on visual tracking. The attack lasts 52 minutes. By the end, Hugh W. Hadley claims 17 confirmed kamikaze kills using proximity-fused ammunition. 17 aircraft destroyed before reaching attack range, 17 pilots dead without achieving anything. Corporal Miyashita is among the attackers. He's never experienced combat. The sky ahead fills with black explosions appearing with supernatural precision. Aircraft in his formation disintegrate. A Zero to his left takes fragments through the engine. The pilot tries maintaining flight, but the Zero crashes miles from any target. Miyashita adjusts his approach. He doesn't understand how Americans anticipate his maneuvers. Doesn't know about VT shells broadcasting radio waves, measuring his exact position. His Zero takes fragments in the tail. Control becomes sluggish. More fragments hit. The canopy shatters. Wind tears at his flight suit. The instrument panel sparks and goes dark. He's 2,000 yards from the nearest ship, close enough to see details, too far to complete his mission. The Zero loses altitude despite his efforts. The engine coughs, oil pressure dropping. He aims for the ship anyway, holding the dive, knowing he won't make it. The Zero hits water 800 yards from Hadley. The bomb detonates on impact. White water erupts. Miyashita dies believing he failed his mission, his emperor, his family. He never knows he's one of 17 pilots killed before reaching attack range, never understands the defensive technology represents engineering sophistication his nation cannot match. Surviving kamikaze pilots who abort and return report experiences that shake commanders' certainty. Approaching task forces through solid walls of exploding shells. Watching squadron mates disintegrate from explosions with uncanny accuracy. One pilot's debriefing survives in archives. The shells explode precisely where we fly, as if guided by invisible hands. Our approach tactics provide no protection. The Americans possess capabilities we cannot overcome. Vice Admiral Ugaki reads these reports with growing desperation. Success rates that justified kamikaze operations are collapsing. His diary entries grow increasingly desperate. The enemy's defensive firepower has increased remarkably. Our special attack aircraft are being destroyed at distances previously considered safe. Japanese scientists examining shell fragments find components that make no sense. Miniaturized vacuum tubes in artillery shells, glass formulations for extreme shock resistance, electronic components whose function remains mysterious. The concept seems physically impossible. By late May, kamikaze doctrine undergoes desperate modification. Pilots receive instructions to approach at maximum altitude before diving vertically. The tactic aims to minimize VT exposure, but proves counterproductive. High-altitude approaches give radar operators more tracking time. Vertical dives make accurate targeting nearly impossible. Ships maneuver out of dive paths. The attempted solution creates more problems than it solves. June 22nd, 1945. The final Kikusui operation ends. Waters off Okinawa grow quiet for the first time in 77 days. Last kamikaze waves repulsed. Airfields that launched attacks bombed into rubble. Surviving pilots grounded. aircraft destroyed, or lacking fuel. The most intensive suicide campaign in military history is over. The accounting begins. 36 American ships sunk, 368 damaged, 4,907 sailors dead. The bloodiest naval battle in American history, numbers that suggest devastating kamikaze success. But context reveals different truth. The vast majority of ships attacked survived. 1,900 kamikaze aircraft launched in organized operations. Against this onslaught, the invasion fleet endured. The survival rate would have been impossible without proximity fuses. Statistical analysis reveals mathematical reality. Ships equipped with adequate VT ammunition survived concentrated attacks at 3 times the rate of those relying on conventional shells. The proximity fuse transformed catastrophic losses into bearable casualties. The difference between strategic defeat and tactical success. Japanese losses were absolute. Approximately 1,900 aircraft and pilots expended in organized attacks during 10 Kikusui operations. Hundreds more in improvised attempts, achieving tactical results far short of strategic requirements. American intelligence officers examine captured documents after Okinawa falls. What they discover reveals how completely proximity fuses dominated without Japanese leadership comprehending why. Vice Admiral Ugaki's diary contains desperate entries. Japanese naval intelligence reports describe new type shells exploding with impossible accuracy. Technical analysis sections remain blank. Scientists examined fragments but couldn't determine mechanism. The miniaturized vacuum tubes made no sense. Radio proximity concepts remained beyond technological comprehension. Even understanding the principle, replication was impossible. Japan's electronics industry lacked precision manufacturing for VT production. Japanese radar development remained primitive compared to American systems. American planners preparing Operation Downfall understood these disparities. Intelligence indicated Japan reserved 10,000 aircraft for kamikaze attacks against invasion fleet. 10,000 suicide aircraft represented nightmare scenario, but planners confident in proximity fuses calculated defensive requirements could be met. Production schedules showed VT manufacturing reaching 100,000 units daily by September 1945. The invasion fleet would carry over 1 million proximity-fused shells. The atomic bombings ended the war before this test occurred, but the proximity fuse's impact on Japanese surrender calculations shouldn't be underestimated. Post-war interrogations revealed Japanese leadership understood they'd lost the technological race. Admiral Soemu Toyota testified the Japanese Navy calculated homeland defense. Kamikaze attacks would achieve less than 10% success rates against proximity defenses. 10% represented tactics rendered militarily worthless. Commander Tadashi Nakajima admitted during interrogation, "We knew Americans had superior technology, but the proximity fuse was beyond our imagination. Our pilots reported shells exploding exactly where they flew, as if guided by invisible hands. It destroyed not just aircraft, but the fundamental premise that spiritual power could overcome material disadvantage." Letters recovered from kamikaze pilots reveal growing awareness. University students drafted into special attack units began understanding deaths would achieve nothing. That American defenses evolved beyond what commanders promised. One letter survives in family archives. "We have been told willingness to die guarantees success. I no longer believe this. The Americans possess weapons we cannot defeat. My death will be meaningless, but I have no choice." The tragedy extends beyond individual deaths. These young men, many just 20 or 21, die in futile attacks against defenses commanders don't understand. Military leadership continues ordering missions as success rates collapse, unwilling to admit tactical innovation failed against technological superiority. The proximity fuse program's legacy extends beyond World War II. The crash development established models for subsequent American technical achievements. Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory continued as center of military innovation, developing guided missiles and satellite navigation. Dr. Merle Tuve reflected in 1975, "We saved lives by making weapons more effective. Every kamikaze shot down by proximity fuse meant American sailors who went home to families. That was worth any effort and expense." The confirmed statistics tell the story with brutal clarity. Time-fused shells required 1,162 rounds per kamikaze kill. VT shells reduced this to 310, four-fold improvement. The difference translated to survival rates, casualty prevention. Ships saved. In optimal conditions, results were more dramatic. Destroyer escort USS Able destroyed a kamikaze with just 2 VT rounds. Destroyer USS Morrison shot down 8 attackers in minutes before being overwhelmed. Individual gun crews became legends, claiming kills impossible with conventional ammunition. The mathematical reality was inescapable. A proximity fuse weighing under 5 pounds, containing 130 electronic components, manufactured for $18 by 1945, functioning under 30 seconds, could destroy a kamikaze with pilot representing years of training, tons of aluminum and steel, and most tragically, irreplaceable human life. Multiplied across thousands of engagements, this equation translated into American victory through technological superiority that determined the war's outcome. The proximity fuse's success validated the entire American approach to 20th century warfare. Investment in technology, faith in industrial production, belief superior equipment could overcome fanatical determination, all proved correct in the most extreme test imaginable. For Japan, kamikaze failure against proximity defenses represented not just military defeat, but invalidation of core beliefs. The divine wind defeated by electronic shells, spirit overcome by science. The harsh lessons influenced post-war Japan's emphasis on technological development and industrial innovation. The contrast between approaches ultimately tells larger story about industrial conflict in the 20th century. Nations that could marshal scientific knowledge, manufacturing capability, and organizational expertise to produce superior military technology held insurmountable advantages. The proximity fuse represented culmination of American strengths, innovative engineering, mass production, systematic problem-solving applied to military challenges. Its triumph over the kamikaze demonstrated conclusively that in modern war, victory belonged to those who could think, build, and deploy better technology. Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal summarized in July 1945. The proximity fuse has helped blaze the trail to Japan. Without protection, this ingenious device gave surface ships, our westward push could not have been so swift, and the cost in men and ships would have been immeasurably greater. The final image crystallizes everything the proximity fuse represented. April 6, 1945, dawn over Okinawa. Radar screens filled with hundreds of contacts, sailors loading shells marked VT, not knowing the sophisticated electronics inside, but trusting the technology offering their only survival chance. Kamikaze pilots sealed in cockpits, final letters written, flying towards defenses they couldn't comprehend and couldn't overcome. When the electronic fuse met the human pilot in skies over Okinawa, the outcome was predetermined by factories in Cincinnati, laboratories in Maryland, and fundamental American belief that technology could preserve life while achieving victory. The proximity fuse hadn't just defeated the divine wind, it proved that in matters of life and death, quality of equipment could overcome any quantity of sacrifice. The technological superiority remained undeniable. The verdict of history remained absolute. In modern warfare, intelligence defeats courage. Science overcomes spirit. And nations that invest in preserving life through superior technology triumph over those treating life as expendable resource. The waters off Okinawa proved this truth with precision measured in saved ships, prevented casualties, and young men who came home because $18 electronic devices knew exactly when to explode.